I'm Jamie Adrian, and joining me today is Cathy Orzolek-Kronner. It is December 20th, 2011, and we are on the campus of McDaniel College. Thank you, Cathy, for being with us today and sharing your memories.
It's a pleasure.
Can we start with some background information? Can you tell me where and when you were born?
Sure, I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, Mercy Medical Center to be exact, and July 7th, 1964.
And did you grow up in Baltimore?
I did.
Mm-hmm.
I did.
When did you start coming up to Carroll County?
Well, when I was probably around elementary school, middle school, I remember a couple of times coming out here on one of those Sunday drives with your family, and going to Boggers, driving a good hour because I don't think, definitely 795 wasn't here, and so anyway, took a long time. But really, my best memories from Westminster come in the 80s, 1982 to 1986, when I was a student here at then Western Maryland College.
So you chose Western Maryland for your education. What was it about Western Maryland that drew you to it?
Well, I had a high school teacher. I mentioned that I was born at Mercy Hospital and I went to Mercy High School. And so one of my high school teachers brought three of us here on a Saturday because she was an alum from here, currently had a brother here. And she said it was beautiful, beautiful campus, a wonderful school. It would be terrific for us. And all three of us ended up coming to Western Maryland. I had narrowed my choices to here and Mount St. Mary's. And really I loved everything about both of the colleges, but quite honestly, the difference for me was that Western Maryland had a pool, and I wasn't actually ever on a swim team. I ultimately became a member of the swim team when I was a college student, but that was really, I mean, as trivial as it sounds, that was the sort of drawing card for me.
And what did you study while you were here at Western Maryland?
Well, I started out as an education minor and thought that I would be a teacher. I wanted to be a teacher. And then sort of, in some ways accidentally, I ended up in an intro to social work course my sophomore year. And so I was introduced to the careers in social work and learned that you could work with all kinds of people, not just children and adolescents, but older adults, people in hospitals, people with mental health issues, people with physical disabilities, etc. And so I ultimately became a social work major.
Okay. You mentioned earlier to me off camera, or Jim did, excuse me, that you have some visual impairments. How did that affect you here at Western Maryland or in school in general?
Well, right away, when I came to campus, I met a guy named Don Raybush, who was actually in the deaf education department, and he basically had this very candid conversation just around, make sure all your teachers, know that you can't see very well, and this was before the ADA, so there really was no ADA. I think there may have been like the 504 Rehabilitation Act, whatever. But the long and the short of the story is really I just basically said to my teachers, I can't read print, and at the time we didn't really have computers, so I basically said I can't read print. I actually didn't type at the time either, because in high school they actually wouldn't let me into the typing class, and this is kind of a little ironic story. Put me in the sewing class or whatever, and I'm thinking, like, really? You really expect me to thread a needle? Like, I'd be a lot better off in front of that typewriter. But anyway, but really, so I just told my teachers, and then I had these couple of high school friends that clearly knew I had this visual problem. But this is what I have historically always thought about the students here at Western Maryland or McDaniel. They're just really kind souls, and as are the faculty. And basically, people just often read to me. Like, I'd meet some people in a class, and we get together as a group, and somebody would read the text out loud. The teachers, basically all I needed was somebody to read me the exams or tests or things like that. Research was problematic because that involves a lot of library kinds of things, but actually our library at the time had this piece of adaptive equipment called a CCV TV, and we actually had one. And so I could actually do library research, it just took longer. But ironically, there was also another visually impaired student here when I was here, a male student, and that was great actually, because it was also we would share stories about some of the challenges that we had, and we would also share resources too.
Did you run into any difficulties, any teachers, any classes that they just wouldn't work with you? And how did you manage that, if you did?
Well, the only class that was really problematic was I needed to take statistics for my major. And I went to my advisor, who is named Mary Ellen Elwell. She's since retired, but we were still very good friends. And I told her, I said, I don't know how I'm going to take statistics because it's a completely visual kind of thing. Not to mention, I can't use a calculator. I just simply can't read the calculator. And she basically said, you got to figure it out. Like, you're going to have to figure it out because the rest of your life, you're going to have to figure out things that you want to do. So you just are going to have to figure it out. And so I had Dr. Claycomb, and he will vouch that I was not a statistical genius by any stretch, but I passed the class. I had a couple of very good friends in that class, and they would at nighttime review what we learned and write it really big. And in some ways, I think the challenge helped me because I had to actually figure out all these problems without a calculator, so it sort of helped me mathematically. I mean, it was a lot of time and a lot of effort, but that was the only class that really I found extremely difficult. But in the long run, I mean, I guess these things always pay off because you do have to figure out things.
From McDaniel, or Western Maryland, I guess at that time, you decided to continue undergrad school.
I did.
Why did you choose that, and then where did you continue your studies at?
Okay. So, I, in social work, historically to present day, it's, you really need to have a master's degree to have really much marketability and to make a decent income. And even today, most of the students will go directly to graduate school. And so I went, so I had decided to do that traditional kind of plan. And so I chose the University of Maryland, but really because I at the time thought it was my only option. I moved back home and I went to graduate school and I knew I could take the bus and that kind of thing, which was fine. I mean, it was a fine program and I met a lot of really great people. But one of the things that I do differently with the students here is let them know that that's not their only option. There's all kinds of options, and I think probably well over half of our students that attend a graduate program end up going out of state. And I think that's good for lots of different reasons. A lot of them end up going to New York, the New York University in Columbia. And I think I pushed that so hard because there's very few regrets I have in life, but one is that I didn't live in New York City for a year, just because I think it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And so you continued social work. Did you focus in on one aspect of social work then in your postgraduate studies?
Well, I pursued clinical social work. There's sort of this macro social work, which looks at larger systems, communities, organizations, and policy making. And then there's the clinical side of social work, where you actually do direct practice with individuals, families, and small groups. And that's kind of what I liked. And my first job post-graduation was on a head trauma unit and in Baltimore. And I stayed there for about 2 years. I was actually hired by an alum from the social work program here at the time, Western Maryland. And so I was hired by her, worked on this head trauma unit, but only stayed about 2 years because it was really, I was young, and most head traumas occur to young males between the ages of 18 and 25. And I thought, so many of the times, any number of these people could have been my friends. I mean, they were getting head traumas from bike riding accidents and skiing accidents, sledding accidents, and then car accidents and things like that. But it was a challenging thing. And then I ultimately went and got another master's degree in administration, and at the same time was working with family and at a family and children's center. And had a lot of different, and this is what I love about social work, had a lot of different careers, or not careers, but I had a lot of different populations that I worked with, and then sort of settled into working back where I was born, Mercy Hospital, at their Center for Eating Disorders.
And when and why did you decide to come back to McDaniel?
So then I decided that I'd like to pursue a doctoral degree. And I think that part of that goal was motivated by wanting, when I graduated from McDaniel, it was a wonderful day, except that I loved being here at the college. I loved it. And every homecoming, I've missed like maybe 2 homecomings in the, I graduated in 86, so 26 or 7 years since I graduated, really missed like 2 homecomings. And so every year I would come back, and every year I would tell everybody I was going to find a job here. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I was definitely coming back to work here. I didn't actually think that I'd end up as, chair of the social work department. But so part of my motivation to pursue my doctoral degree was to have the opportunity maybe to come back and teach. And then the other thing is, it was kind of like a self challenge, because the biggest challenge in my life has really been pursuing education with a sight impairment. And so I think I just was really, just wanted to see if I could actually do it. And so, did it. And then while I was a doctoral student, started to teach some courses here, as well as the University of Maryland as an adjunct. Loved it. And then when one of the social work professors left, I came up here as a visiting instructor for 2 years. And then ultimately was hired on. I also, when I started here, I was also 7 months pregnant. So that was an interesting start. I'll just tell you one little story because it's really funny. So when I was hired, the provost at the time was Joan Coley, who later became the president. And so I knew Dan Reese was one of my professors in the social work department. He asked me if I would like to do this. I talked to the provost, Joan Coley, and I said, so I talked to her on the phone, and I said, now you do know that I'm pregnant? And she said, no, I actually didn't know that. And I said, yeah. And so I said, but here's the thing. I talked to Dan about this. I'm due to have this baby on October 27th. So I think I'll need 2 weeks off, and I have coverage, and then we will be launching into the and then I can come back And then I'm going to launch into, then there's the Thanksgiving break, but it'll all be fine. I've got it all covered. And she said, I guess this is your first baby? And I said, yeah, how'd you know? And she said, that due date is so ambiguous. And I said, oh no, my doctor, she said October 27th. And I will tell you that I taught my night class on October 27th. It got out, it was 6 to 9. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that we would have that research class because what we were covering that evening was statistics. And I knew that there was no way I was going to get out of class teaching a class with statistics because it was like the most dreaded thing to teach for me. Anyway, I left. I went home, went to bed at 10 o'clock, woke up at 11 o'clock, water broke, and then had the baby the morning of October 28th. And my plan worked perfectly.
Crazy. Well, I hope with your second child you took a little more than 2 weeks off to have it.
No, this guy, with my second child, what he did was he waited till this whole semester was over in May. It was the baccalaureate mass that night, and anyway, but I never made it to the baccalaureate mass. He was born earlier. I went into labor at like 3 o'clock, and he was born at 4:10. Yeah, I could have made it maybe.
That's great.
So I got the whole summer off, but nothing extra.
So what positions have you held here at McDaniel?
Well, so, I mean, they've all been in teaching, but I started as an adjunct lecturer, then I moved into the visiting professor, and then I moved into assistant professor, then I was promoted to associate professor, and then ultimately chair of the social work department. And I'm also currently, this is my second year as chair of the faculty development committee, and what that means is we give out the money for research projects and musical or artistic endeavors and things like that.
What sort of relationship have you developed with students now that you're more in an administrative position instead of being the one-on-one with the teacher?
Well, I still teach though. I still teach 3 classes one semester and 2 the other. I have a really great relationship with college students. I've always, even when I was doing my clinical social work, I mean, the people that I worked with the most were adolescents and young adults, the people I kind of connected with the most, and perhaps that's sort of, maybe I myself am stuck at like 19 or something, I'm not sure. But anyway, so we have a really good relationship. When I was here, one of the things that made the college really special was our teachers really took a personal interest in us, and a lot of them lived locally, and so we would, we might have a dinner at their house, or as the weather was, as spring approached, sometimes we'd have a cookout or something like that. And I've kind of carried on that tradition. I have students over, at least once a semester. And just also, I have a really, actually, a unique relationship with some of the students, and I'll describe that. But let me preface it before I describe it. So when I was a therapist, you had a very private life. Like, your clients knew absolutely nothing about you other than the obvious is how you present it. But other than that, absolutely nothing. So, but as a teacher here, as a professor here, it's, you don't have to maintain that kind of privacy. And so with having the sight impairment, I also don't drive. So so a lot of times when I'm with students, it's also in the context of driving somewhere. Like, maybe we're making a run to the grocery store, or there's been times when I've had a student meeting scheduled, but I'm also a single parent, but I might get a call from the school while I'm speaking with the student that says your son is sick, you know, what should we do? And the student will say, as long as we can keep talking, I'll take you to get your son, you know. And so we kind of have this kind of interesting relationship with some of the students, and you know, and also a lot of the students like to, you know, they're new to the area, they want to do things. We're always looking for rides, places. So if they want to go to, there's a place called Hashawa, which is a big nature center, lots of trails to hike. So if they want to come with my sons and myself, you know, they come as, you know, they kind of are very much welcome. So anyway, but then also clearly I have a very professional relationship with the students also. But I should also say that social work is one of those fields where networking is really important. And so we sort of develop like I begin to develop by the time the students are juniors, and especially the social work majors, more of a collegial relationship, and really depend on a lot of these students to then become field instructors for our current students and things like that. In fact, I'm in touch with lots and lots of alums, some of whom are field instructors, others who come up and give a talk, you know, all different kinds of reasons keep us in touch.
Sounds like you're a special teacher. What sort of, do you have any special memories of McDaniel? Whether you were a student or a professor, anything special that really sticks out about your time that you've had here?
Sure, but let me get back and say I wouldn't say that I'm a special teacher. I would say that I really am more of the norm around here. I mean, really, that is the draw of McDaniel College, kind of, you know. So a special memory. Well, yeah, I'm trying to. Everything that comes to mind, I'm not sure should be recorded actually, but well, let me just start with this one particular story, just because it was kind of funny. So one of those classes that I had covered when my son was born, I had asked a friend to come up that morning and teach this class for me. And she said, okay. And so fortunately, she also knew, she was a nutritionist. And I think I was at was teaching a human behavior course, and we introduced different kinds of social issues as well. So it was the social issue was eating disorders. So I had this nutritionist that I had used to work with come up to do a talk when just the whole idea around weight and nutrition, and dispel all kinds of myths around diets and things like that. Anyway, fortunately, she knew the counselor of the wellness center here at that time. I think we just called it Director of Counseling Services, Susan Glore, who we both knew before I even taught here, because we had come up here to talk about our program. But anyway, so one of the students got up to use the restroom and never came back. And then Susan came to the classroom, and my friend said, there's a student that left like 20 minutes ago to use the restroom, or 10 minutes ago to use the restroom. A little worried. I don't even know where the restroom is, but just something seemed weird about that when she left. And sure enough, the student had passed out. And it was good that Susan was there, because the student, I don't know, had some kind of fainting issue or whatever. Anyway, but the point, it all turned out to be great. The student was fine, everything was completely fine. But the irony is that, of course, my friend never came back again. She's like, no, I'm not going to lecture again when you're not there. But let me think of a better story. So oh my gosh, there's so many stories because but I can't okay, here's a great story. So teaching with a sight impairment is in any context, it's always interesting because I'm always mistaking people, or maybe walking into the wrong room, or finding myself meeting somebody at lunch and then ending up at a table with people I don't even know, and but anyways, this one particular so it was the start of school, and we always come back to school before the public school starts, so I had my one son with me, and the student came to the door and said hi, and I thought it was this other student that was in my class last year, and she was also, my niece was here at the time, and she's also a good friend of hers. And I got up and I was like, oh, hi Carolyn, how are you? And I actually gave her a hug. And I said, Michael, you know Carolyn, right? MC's friend. And he said, I've never seen that girl before in my life. And I'm like, what? And she said, he's right, I'm not Carolyn. She's like, I'm a new transfer student. She's like, but you're like the nicest person. I've never gotten a hug from one of my potential professors before. It turned out that she took several of my classes, was a social work major, and just had an interesting beginning. So, I don't know, other special stories. I think back to when I was a student, there was just all good memories, but nothing is really.
Well, if something comes up later, you can add it in.
Okay.
What sort of legacy do you want to leave behind here at McDaniel? You've been involved with the school for so many years.
Well, that is that's a wonderful question. So I think I'd really like to establish myself as a really, really effective teacher and advisor, and somebody that students and I think they already do this very much respect and in some way we have this sort of mantra, changing lives, we're changing lives for a changing world and that kind of thing, and it's really sometimes I'll get a card or something like that from a student who will say, you really guided me in a really fulfilling direction or something like that, and I would just like to continue to really strengthen sort of strengthen that. So I guess if I were to leave behind a legacy, it would really just to be all of those kinds of things that I just named, but also the thing that I haven't been able to do a whole lot of because of being a single parent with because with two boys that are still pretty young, 10 and 12. I'd also like to leave behind, at some point before I retired, I would like to put together some sort of book, but I'm not sure that I really want it to be like a textbook, but maybe more of a memoir around just, really looking at obstacles as challenges and opportunities and those kinds of things.
No, that's great. That's great. And that kind of leads into another question I have is, how do you think your visual impairment has shaped who you are today?
Well, it's I mean, really, it's a big part of who I am because, on the one hand, it's made me probably much more humble, because I told you that there's always all these, embarrassing stories, but that become kind of funny. But also, it's made me really have to reach out and connect with people. So, for example, I mean, we talk about like this, I was talking about the ride issue. Well, it's interesting because I've gotten to know so many people in a whole different way, because when you're taking a ride with somebody and it's just you and that person in the car, you have really interesting conversations. So I think in many ways it's really kind of shaped my life in terms of having to really depend a lot on the whole sense of community. And so I think in that way, that's been really essential to my life, that whole sense of community. And I actually think it's a great thing, and it's unfortunate that we kind of live in a society that's so very where independence is so very, very valued. Because I mean, I have met lots of people and have heard all kinds of amazing stories and experiences and things like that. But also, I'm kind of credited with, people will say things like, I don't know how you do it. You're a single parent with these two wild boys, and they do say wild, energetic, and you just do it, you just do it, and you do it without much difficulty. In some ways it is actually very difficult. But I kind of try to carry that out, and especially try to sort of model that for my kids. Like, look, you can basically do whatever it is that you want to do, but I will say that, probably I loved it here. I loved McDaniel as a student. It was great, but probably there was also the draw to come back here because I did know that it was such a warm and inviting and accepting kind of place. Now, I will also say this, that the city itself, I'm actually on the Carroll Transit board, which is the transit, the paratransit company here in Carroll County. But I do think we need to make, that area more accessible to people who don't drive, because you kind of, I live in town, which is great. I mean, I love living in town. My kids love it. It's a great place to live. But, sometimes it's hard to get anywhere outside of town. So that was a little bit of a stretch from the question.
It's okay. That's okay. And you have been involved with McDaniel for so many years. How have you seen McDaniel, Westminster, and Carroll County, in that sense, change over those years? How have you felt that presence change?
Well, the college itself, a lot of people would say that the college has really changed. And I would say that there's been some additional buildings, there's been some additional housing, there's been some renovated, really nicely renovations made to some of the existing buildings. But in general, I don't really think the campus has changed all that much. I think that the values, that were promoted when I was a student are the same ones that are promoted today. And again, there are more values around, student faculty, the cultivation of student faculty relationships, of really, having a lot of activities on campus. I mean, I see that as having grown. There's a lot more opportunities and things like that, a lot more clubs on campus. but I think, I think the campus has always been absolutely beautiful. I still think it's absolutely beautiful. I know we've talked a lot about, me having some low vision, but I'll tell you, every time I come onto campus, I walk past Levine Hall and the Alumni Hall, and then through campus to my building, which is Hill Hall. I just think it is absolutely breathtaking. I think it is such a beautiful, beautiful campus. But anyway, so as far as the campus goes, I don't really think in general that there's been like dramatic changes, particularly around sort of the intangible stuff. And then as far as the community, when I was a student here, we hardly ever left campus. We hardly ever left, except that what's the Carroll Arts Center now used to be a movie theater, and sometimes we would go to see a movie. But other than that, we really hardly left campus. Now I think there's more connection between the community and the campus, and I think that the community, I'm not entirely sure what was there before, but I think there's a lot of great little shops and restaurants, and for a small town, I think there's a lot that goes on in town. One of the things that I think is particularly just sort of novel about Westminster is the number of parades. There's like a parade for every event, and I happen to be one of those people that love parades. I just went to the Macy's Day Parade. But I think those parades are they're really fun. They bring the community out. They bring everybody together. I live, like I said, very close to, I'm just a street over from Main Street, and every time there's like a festivity, usually there's a potluck at somebody's house, so that we'll all meet before we go to the parade or after we go to the parade. But there's just this whole sense of community. The little community theater or the plays up here, again, I think they draw a lot of people from the community, provide a lot of, sort of a lot of opportunities for students and the neighbors to interact. So I think that there's been some changes in that direction. It's really funny too, because some of the little shops around here are really, really very cool little boutique-y kinds of stores, which I'm not sure that anybody would really, most people are surprised that Westminster has these really cool little boutiques, really. So that's where I see a real, big change in the community. And then of course, if you drive here to or from Baltimore, 140 is very different. And I would say, I should have been really living like 100 years ago, because I'm not like a big strip mall fan or anything like that. So the drive looks very different. It's way more built up, and but the good news is that there is still a lot of rural areas left around, Westminster.
And with having young children, how do you like raising them in Westminster and in Carroll County?
Well, I always think that Westminster is the perfect place to raise a family. Now, the downside to that is that, I mentioned before, I'm a single parent, and I'm a single parent through my husband had died. But when I say it's the perfect place to raise a family, it really is, but I think it must have the lowest divorce rate ever, because honestly, it's like these families. It's really unusual with today's statistics. It's extremely unusual that there's so many intact families, which is great, except if you're single, it's not so great. But anyway, So, but you know what? It's the perfect place really to raise my kids because it's very safe, very very safe. I mean, it's funny because you know sometimes people will identify certain streets as being a little high risk, and I'm thinking I grew up in Baltimore, like you know. So it's very, I think it's very safe. My kids are 10 and 12, and at this point they they're pretty involved in the Carroll Arts Center. So whether they're taking an art class or in a play or something, I mean they can walk there, walk home. I have no problem with them going to one of the parks near us. This year they've ventured out and have been able to walk back and forth to the library by themselves, or one of the local. We like this little local sub shop called Julia Nova's, and or they like to go up to Sam's Bagels on Saturday morning, and these are all. I mean, I feel very comfortable and okay with that. I really do, and for somebody that doesn't drive, there really are a lot of things that they can do locally that we can get to. So it's all those things are really good about the town.
Well, that sounds great. I'm just going to ask you one other question, and that is there anything else you want to share with us today about McDaniel or Carroll County or Westminster?
No, it's kind of one of those things, like it's like Hashawa, like you don't really want to tell too many people about it because something really good is going on. You're just not sure if you want everybody to know about it. Actually, I'm kind of kidding about that. No, it's a very good package.
Well, great. Well, I want to thank you, Cathy, for sharing your memories with us today.
Okay, thank you.